How did she kill you?
There's an island of trees standing in a sea of cotton, not far from a place called Hazel Green, where a story of murder has never been forgotten, and flowers won't grow and birds don't sing. Here once stood a grand old antebellum mansion, built before the clash of blue and gray, where lived a fair and beautiful young lady with flaming red hair and evil ways. 6 times she was wed at the altar of God. On her hand she wore 6 golden rings. And now 6 men lie deep beneath the sod, 1 mile east of Hazel Green.
In a cotton field just outside of Hazel Green, there once was a house that was owned by the infamous Elizabeth Dale. Mrs. Dale married for the first time in 1812, and she was only 17 years old. Her first husband died of black tongue, and her second husband died of suicide. Her husbands kept adding up, and so did their mysterious deaths. For some, the cause of death was unknown. By the time Miss Dale had died, most believed that she had killed at least a few of her husbands. Locals say that she kept a hat rack in her home with 1 hat for each of her dead husbands. According to legend, her ghost still roams the location of her old home, waiting to take another husband.
She married a planter, a merchant, and a lawyer. All 3 became ill and soon died. The young widow wed again 3 more times to wealthy men, who also fell prey and lost their lives. Upon each husband's death, as she witnessed their last breath, with words of iron she'd send for her slaves, who in the dead of night, by a single candlelight, were forced to dig another unmarked grave. 6 times she was wed at the altar of God. On her hand she wore 6 golden rings. And now 6 men lie deep beneath the sod, 1 mile east of Hazel Green.
Hi guys, I am on Digital Alabama looking at the Black Widow of Hazel Green, Alabama. This article is just written in March. I'll leave links to the 2 articles I'm going to show you in the description area, along with credits to the people that posted the pictures that I'm using and the gentleman that sings the song that you are hearing. Now, Miss Elizabeth Highbrown Root, I don't know how you say her name correctly, built her home on an Indian burial mound. And first it was a cabin by one of her husbands, and a later husband built the mansion on there. And so this particular article goes more into the arguments she had with her neighbor Abner Tate. And this is the reason we know more about this story and the legend of her, as because of what happened between all of them. So it says down here that they had squabbles over loose livestock and other plantation matters. And it says that Mr. Tate was not blind to her beauty and openly charged her with murder. And so the thing is, they were all saying in these stories that she had something about her that men found extremely attractive, and like she lured them in, sort of like people would say a witch would do or something, in that sense. That's how the legend was built up around how she was able to have so many husbands in a time that this was pretty much unheard of. And so how much of this is factual, how much of this is legend, that was built up by this argument between the 2 people of Elizabeth and Mr. Tate, no one will ever know except the 2 of them. And they're not here now to tell their stories. But what had happened was, they said she had a hat rack in the middle of her hallway for each husband after their death. He openly charged her with murder, so Elizabeth sought to put an end to her enemy. He was wounded by a shotgun in the hands of one of his slaves, and rumor had it that Elizabeth paid one of her slaves to shoot him. And then it says that failing, Elizabeth, Mrs. Rout, took a clever scheme. She had been receiving much attention from a D.H. Bingham, a school teacher in Meridianville, who, actually was to be husband number 7. And he desired her hand in marriage because she was beautiful even at 60. So when it was reported that a drover from Kentucky on his way back from selling his herd in South Alabama had been murdered at Tate's home and cremated in a large fireplace there, she had Mr. Bingham bring charges against him to get rid of this neighbor. So what Mr. Tate did was had a book written called The Defense of Abner Tate against the murder charges preferred by D.H. Bingham. He even struck further that Mrs. Rout, charging her bridal chamber was a charnel house, and spoke of her as the woman around whose marriage couch 6 grinning skeletons were already hung. This led Elizabeth to file a $50,000 damage suit against the author of the book. The following quotations from Tate's book were taken from the Circuit Court records of 1857, the year after the suit was entered. So in this article, you can read for yourself what all he wrote. He was talking about Mr. Bingham being taken in by this woman, this shrewd and calculating woman. And then he goes on to say he must just be after her money. But if he succeeds every time her lips touched his, desire must have fled in horror as if from the cold, clammy taste of a putrid corpse. He would indeed have waded through my blood and the tears of a broken wife and host of agonizing relatives to the possession of her property, but the person he could not touch. The clasp of her arms around his neck would call up dreadful shapes to sit upon his dreary pillow and in make his nights as fearful. And he goes on to say other things about though the deed should flee away in shuddering horror from the bride, there will be enough grinning friends to witness the pair. But he went on to create this dramatic and extremely lurid tale of the deeds that evil Miss Elizabeth have done. Now, whether she did or not, no one knows for sure. But it was bad enough to make her want to leave where she was living, and she left with a son to go live in Mississippi. And goes into arguments where they reply to each other, and he says, "Why are you trying to hurt me?" And she says, "I'm not." In this one right here, okay, listen here. This goes into more detail about each husband. You can see that their deaths are kind of similar. Black tongue producing swollen, distorted features. Her second husband, Mr. Flanagan, he's the one that I went to his grave at Maplewood Cemetery and did the spirit box session. You'll be able to see that complete session here in just a minute. Not much was known about him. He lasted 3 months before he succumbed to a strange malady. Now, in the play that you saw previously, the little girl said that he committed suicide, so I don't know that would be the case. But she married her third husband, Mr. Jeffries, and he's the one that built the home, and he was buried of a strange malady in the barn and widowed for the third time. She married a Mr. High, and he suddenly died, and then she wedded another man, a Mr. Brown of Newmarket, and he died before the paint dried, and he was the one, the one up here was the one that built the cabin, but the one down here was the one that built the actual house. And so the last one was a Mr. Rout, but he suddenly died as well. So it tells a little bit more about Tom has taken over the Annabelle Mansion. I read in another article that Vandals destroyed it and burned it in 1968, as idiots do. But they believe the place to be haunted, and this writer says, my own son and his friends visited the site one night and came back shaken to the core. When asked what they'd seen, they replied their flashlight revealed glowing eyes 5 foot off the ground and a dark mass which threatened to approach through the trees if they ventured closer. Imagine a 17-year-old literally shaking all over as he told this terrifying tale. Something scared him. There was no mistaking that. What do you believe? Did and do Indian spirits roam the mound Route House was built upon? Did Elizabeth encounter Indian spirits in her time? Do spirits of the 6 dead husbands, Elizabeth's daughter, her father, and countless frightened, abused slaves inhabit the woods encapsulating the mansion? Would you go see for yourself? Once this lockdown is finally over, I'm interested to go find where this place is myself and see. But in the meantime, let's go over to Huntsville, Alabama, to Maple Hill Cemetery, where husband number 2, Mr. Flanagan, is buried. Let's see what he has to say. And you can decide for yourself. Did she kill these husbands? Was she wrongly accused? Let me know what you think in the comments. Hello, Mr. Flanagan. My name's Jessica. A kind of peace. I mean no harm or disrespect. I'm here to see if you would like to talk to me. We're right up against the road, guys, for this part of the cemetery, so I apologize. I'm going to leave that right there in case you are able to see anything on it. Mr. Flanagan, I'd like to hear your side of the story if you'd like to speak to me in my little box I got right here. And let your story be heard so others can hear you. Ooh. Is Mr. Flanagan here with me today?
Like that.
Hello? Mr. Flanagan, I wanted to see if you were murdered by your wife. How did she kill you? If they tell your story. Thank you for speaking to me. Goodbye.
Then one day, a neighbor claimed murder against her, but offered not 1 ounce of proof. And soon she moved away to Mississippi, they say, with a handful of slaves and the truth. Now time has consumed the old Annabella mansion, the brains are lost within the tangled vine. And they say that 6 ghosts haunt the old plantation, searching for their fair but evil bride. 6 times she was wed at the altar of God. On her hand she wore 6 golden rings. And now 6 men lie deep beneath the sod, 1 mile east of Hazel Green. 1 mile east of Hazel Green. 1 mile east of Hazel Green.
Woo!
1 mile each.
Yeah.